Hello Raptors fans, and welcome back to Raptors Report. Today we are going to be discussing the Toronto Raptors' victory over the defending champion Boston Celtics. And in light of that very pleasant development and their second win in a row, I think that we should be talking about what the Toronto Raptors are supposed to be doing this season, because right now it's a little conflicting. On one hand, you would want to see the Toronto Raptors win games, especially against bitter division rivals like the Boston Celtics. On the other hand, the Toronto Raptors probably should be losing a lot of games this season so that they can remain in the hunt for a top pick in this year's draft, which is supposed to be one of the best in recent memory. So we'll discuss that a little bit, and I also want to talk about the starting lineup, because if you've noticed, the Raptors won their past two games without the help of starting point guard Immanuel Quickley, who's been out with a back injury. So he has not been very healthy this season, but I think it speaks more to the composition of the starting lineup and what the Toronto Raptors should do moving forward, because as I've discussed, I don't really like the composition of the starting lineup. I mentioned this even in the offseason. Before I had even seen that lineup play, I knew that there was going to be an issue with the defense. So that is something that we will discuss here. But first, we'll talk about this little mini winning streak that the Toronto Raptors are on. So the Toronto Raptors beat the Boston Celtics last night convincingly. They were playing good defense all night long. Now that they've had some time with their personnel, they have begun to put it together on the defensive side of the ball. Defense takes time and reps with the people that you are playing with. And it really helps that they have a more balanced lineup. But in light of what the Raptors are doing and looking more competent as a basketball team, it really begs the question, what is going to happen with the Toronto Raptors, and are they going to be able to remain in the hunt for the number one overall pick? Right now, the Raptors have the fourth worst record in the league. They have 10 wins, 31 losses. They are ahead of Utah in the tank standings because they've lost more games. They are behind Charlotte, New Orleans, and Washington. Charlotte has only won 9 games, and New Orleans has more losses. So it's actually kind of interesting when you see these teams jockeying for position at the bottom of the standings, because it's tough to ascertain who's going to be near the bottom when the season rounds out, because any team can go on a hot streak, any team can win a couple of games, just like the Raptors have shown. There's talent on every squad, even teams like the Wizards. There's guys who can get hot and they can take advantage of a team that is struggling. Like the Boston Celtics, for example, have gone 500 over their past 14 games, and they haven't looked very good, especially last night. They look kind of out of sorts, even though they're fully healthy. The season has ups and downs, and it's kind of tough to figure out what the Raptors are going to be doing. In terms of remaining strength of schedule, if you are a tank fan, I have very, very, very bad news for you, because out of the 30 teams in the NBA, the Toronto Raptors have the easiest remaining strength of schedule, with a winning percentage of the remaining teams of only 45%. They are playing the Washington Wizards 4 times. They're playing the Pelicans once, the Hornets twice, the Jazz twice, the Trailblazers twice, and the Brooklyn Nets twice. They have a lot of really winnable games. And thankfully, the Washington Wizards, who are the worst team in the entire league, are second on that list, and then Charlotte are 5th on that list. So it's not as if the teams around them have a really tough schedule, but it looks like the Toronto Raptors are going to struggle to remain among the worst teams in the league, especially with the team looking the way it is. So I'm not exactly sure how to fix that issue. I think that, in all honesty, 2 of the players that the Toronto Raptors could trade at this point, I think might even make the team better. Bruce Brown, for example, and Kelly Olynyk, in my opinion, have been playing far below a rotation caliber player in the NBA. So with those 2 players out of the lineup, it really looks like the Toronto Raptors might actually get better. The only person that the Toronto Raptors are rumored to be, kicking the tires on trading is Chris Boucher. And with him out of the lineup, that might hurt them. So, but there are other teams that could sell that would make them much worse. For example, the Brooklyn Nets, if they manage to make a Cam Johnson trade, they will get far worse. He is a good player, like an actually very good player, and it looks like they are going to try and trade him. So they could get a lot worse. Utah is another team. They actually have a pretty hard strength of schedule remaining, and they've got some guys that they could move on from. John Collins, I don't think they're going to trade Lauri Markkanen, but he's a potential trade candidate. Colin Sexton, who's actually a good player, he could be traded as well. So it looks like the Toronto Raptors may fall out of the bottom 5, which is not really where you want to be. I said this before, too good to tank, but I don't know. The strength of schedule really does pick up and get a lot easier from this point. So it's kind of interesting to see what the team does, because I don't think that making big trades, unless they are really willing to consider a Jakob Poeltl trade, they are probably going to be a little bit better than some of the other teams at the bottom of the standings. So we'll see how that shakes out. Next up, we got to talk about Immanuel Quickley and the starting lineup, because one thing that I've noticed over the past couple of games is that the Toronto Raptors defense has looked a lot better, especially with the starting group. And that's not really a surprise. So what we've seen is a return to the original starting lineup plus Scotty Barnes that they had at the beginning of the season when they were in a lot of close games. That starting lineup being Davion Mitchell, RJ Barrett, Grady Dick, Jakob Poeltl, and now Scotty Barnes. And this is a much more balanced lineup in terms of offense and defense than the one with Immanuel Quickley. The problem with having Immanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, and Grady Dick on the floor at the same time is that is a rotation at your smaller positions that is simply going to get flambéed by any backcourt in the NBA. You have too many holes to plug, and even solid defenders like Scotty Barnes and Jakob Poeltl are really going to struggle to clean up the messes for them. With Davion Mitchell at the point of attack and being able to guard multiple positions, it is not as disastrous on the defensive end. There's more balance within the starting lineup. And also, there are diminishing returns when it comes to offensive players, especially higher usage offensive players. RJ is a higher usage offensive player. Scotty Barnes is a higher usage offensive player. And even Grady Dick, who is mostly a shooter, I think that he plays a lot better when he gets to touch the ball and handle the ball and play with the ball a little bit more. He has some playmaking talent that we saw last night, but he also just seems to be more involved in the offense and seems a lot more comfortable when he's able to, dribble the ball a little bit more and hold on to the ball a little bit more than just, catching and shooting. In terms of the starting lineup moving forward, I think that somebody has to go to the bench. And right now, I think that person is Grady Dick. I know that the Raptors have won their past 2 games with Immanuel Quickley out of the lineup, but I kind of want to see what it looks like when Immanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, Scotty Barnes, Jakob Poeltl, and Ochai Agbaji are all starting, because that really is what I think the starting lineup should be. I want to give it a try. I want it so that the Toronto Raptors have more balance in the starting lineup. Then off of the bench, I think that Grady Dick can be the featured offensive player, and he gets to play with the ball a little bit more. He can run off screens and catch the ball more often. He'll be more featured. And I've mentioned this multiple times before, but I think that what we're seeing right now is kind of proof in the pudding. When there is more balance, when there's more defense, and you take a lower usage player like Davion Mitchell and slot them into the starting lineup alongside Scotty, RJ, and Grady, things look a lot more coherent. There's a more established pecking order, and then on the defensive end, it's just night and day. And I think that we can get into that right now. We can talk about the player evaluations, and there are 3 guys in the starting lineup who are all jockeying for best player, and the first player we'll mention, Jakob Poeltl got the chain, so he could be the number 1 guy that we mention here, but I'm just going to give it to Scotty Barnes, because Scotty Barnes really showed out last night and was phenomenal, and especially on the defensive end. So let's get to his statistics. 18 points on 16 shots. He was 1 of 5 from 3, so there were some issues there. 3 rebounds, also some issues there, because I think in the second unit, when he's playing alongside Kelly Olynyk and Chris Boucher, he has to take more of an active role in the rebounding department, but he is guarding players on the perimeter, so it's, not all his fault. 9 assists, very impressive. 1 steal, 2 blocks, and 2 turnovers. So statistically, you might look at that and say he was good, but what's the big deal? In terms of the defense that he was playing last night, especially on Jason Tatum, he was great. Just great. Jason Tatum had 16 points on 15 shots. He was 3 of 9 from 3. Scottie Barnes was all over him. He was playing great help defense, great. He had a fantastic blocked shot against Jaylen Brown where he tracked him on the perimeter, retreated into the paint when Brown came off of the screen. Brown drove into the paint. Scottie Barnes faked a charge and then swatted Jaylen Brown's shot when he tried to Euro step around him and get it off of the glass. Scottie just swatted it away. And between the two of those players, they both had kind of nightmare games. Jaylen Brown, 10 points on 16 shots. Jason Tatum, 16 points on 15 shots. Scottie Barnes was a big reason why the Toronto Raptors were able to walk away with a victory. The defense that he was playing was excellent. He was in the paint, he was on the perimeter, he was doing so many things, so many positive things defensively, and they really wouldn't have won this game without him. And then on the offensive side of the ball, he was hitting his mid-range shot, he was making plays for others. He had a fantastic, probably the assist of the season for the Raptors, no doubt about it, but definitely got to be a contender this year in the NBA. He drove into the paint, was guarded very tightly, jumped under the basket and made a no-look behind-the-back bounce pass to Jakob Poeltl, who made the layup. Wow. Unbelievable. I just thought that watching the game, he was in command. He was really showing everything that he had at his disposal, and he willed the Toronto Raptors to a victory, picking up the best player on the Celtics, making plays for others, hitting shots, commanding the game, handling the ball, doing everything. I just thought it was a magnificent performance from him. Next up, we'll go to Jakob Poeltl. Jakob Poeltl was perfect from the floor. Perfect 8 for 8 for 16 points, 11 rebounds, 3 of them offensive, 2 assists, a block, and 0 turnovers. Like, statistically, almost a perfect night. Amazing, especially on offense. He really kind of bamboozled Kristaps Porzingis in the paint. Porzingis was hot from 3, and that is not a strength of Jakob Poeltl's, is guarding the 3-point line. Kristaps Porzingis was 4 of 5 from 3, so that was kind of an issue. His paint defense has become a subject of concern among Raptors fans. I understand it's not as good as it was earlier in the season, but I think that he played some pretty impressive defense last night in certain spots. He had a nice steal on Jaylen Brown, who was driving into the lane. He just kind of snatched it from him. And I think the Raptors just look better with him defensively on the floor. He's very good at organizing the defense, telling people where to be. The unfortunate thing is that last night he was pulled out of the paint quite a bit by Kristaps Porzingis, so he wasn't as present around the rim. But I think that the Toronto Raptors perimeter defenders did a really good job last night, and so he didn't have to clean up a lot of messes. But on offense, you can't ask for much more from this guy. Every time he catches the ball around the paint, he's a threat to score. His push shot is fantastic. His layup accuracy is good. He had a dunk last night, just a really good game, and he got the chain, probably because he was perfect from the field, but I'll give it to Scottie over Jakob Poeltl because I think Scottie's defense was more important. But Jakob Poeltl he's come in second so many times. It's really just a testament to how consistent he's been for the Raptors. And there were 3 really good players in the starting lineup. RJ Barrett, the guy had a fantastic bounce back performance. 22 points on 10 of 18 shooting. He was also 1 of 5 from 3, so he didn't really have it going there. 1 of 4 from the free throw line, so that's a bit of a concern. He seems to be regressing back to not being a very good free throw shooter, but 10 rebounds, that's big. 8 assists, also very big. 1 steal, 1 block. He blocked Jaylen Brown, so Jaylen Brown had kind of a disaster class last night. 2 turnovers. And I think that he did a good job on defense. I think that he was, when he had to pick up one of Boston's, very good perimeter players, he did a pretty good job of staying in front of them, making it difficult. Of course, He's not an amazing defender, don't get me wrong here, and there were some blow-bys and some issues there, some help defense issues, but in terms of what he brought on the offensive side of the ball, it was great. He is an opportunistic scorer, and he's not a guy who like pops off in one quarter a la Chris Boucher. He's a very steady scorer. He scored throughout the game, just in small doses, playing off of the ball, catching created shots, cutting, being the recipient of good passes. I think that he played the second banana role perfectly last night, and so perfectly he was the Raptors' leading scorer. So if you can be the guy who the defense isn't focusing on and end up being the leading scorer for your team, you've done something right. And the weird thing about RJ Barrett is sometimes he doesn't play the right way offensively. He takes bad shots and does that. But then other times he is just playing the game absolutely the right way and making all the right reads and really helping your offense function and not making any mistakes on the offensive end. That was last night, I think, and most of the shots, even though he was 1 of 5, he was taking open catch and shoot shots that just did not go in. I think he had a really good game on offense, and then on defense, not so bad. If you start pulling bad defenders out from around him, I think he can hold his own, and he was a big reason why the Raptors won the game last night. Next up, we got to talk Davion Mitchell, because Davion Mitchell, I mentioned it in the beginning of this video, he adds a little bit of something to the Raptors lineup. He is a defensive specialist. He's a low usage player. And when he's hitting shots like he was last night, he does enough on the offensive end that, you're very happy with what you're seeing. Davion Mitchell definitely did enough on offense. 10 points, 4 of 6 shooting, 2 of 2 from 3. He hit the first shot of the game for the Raptors to put them up early. He hit a corner 3-point shot, and he had 4 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, only 1 turnover. I think this was one of the best games of the season from him. He hounds other players on the perimeter. He has the balls to go up and defend guys much larger than him. He had to switch onto Jaylen Brown a couple of times, and he held his own there. He's very active. He's very good at getting up into guys. He gives the Raptors some defensive energy on the perimeter. I think that this is something that the Raptors need. They need a defensive identity, and he has brought a defensive identity to this team, and he's not a perfect player by any means. He's a specialist who does one thing very well at a high level, and last night he was integral to the Toronto Raptors being able to keep the Boston Celtics from getting what they wanted. And when you have 3 guys that are capable defenders and you only have 2 guys that need help, then things start making a lot more sense. And Davion Mitchell just did a good job. I just think that when you watch him play on the defensive end, he's always putting in 100% and plays with energy and spirit. That's a big thing that it's hard to capture when a player is playing with a lot of kind of energy and intensity and has that lust for life where you just see that they're really trying to get the team going on the defensive end. It's infectious. And as we all know, Scotty Barnes is a momentum player, and I feel like he feeds off of the energy of the team. And if you have another guy in there who is really trying to get the team going, especially on the defensive end, that can be infectious. Definitely an underrated player on the Toronto Raptors roster. Last up, and I don't think that this was a bad night, so he came in last here, but I mean, they beat the Boston Celtics. You got to have most of your players playing pretty well. I thought Grady Dick had an okay night. 12 points on 9 shots. He was 2 of 6 from 3. So again, I really want to see him pop off from 3 and have like a really strong 3-point shooting performance, because it seems like his shot is kind of tailed off. 2 of 2 from the free throw line, 3 rebounds, 4 assists. And that was a big one. Grady Dick, because he's able to play with the ball a little bit more in the starting lineup, he's able to make plays for other people. 4 assists, really good. 0 steals, 0 blocks, only 1 turnover, but he had a couple of really nice dimes to RJ Barrett. He was kind of making plays, and teams have to respect his shot, so he's able to get into the lane. One of the things he can contribute if he can't get all the way to the rim is making a pull-up pass or a pull-up shot. He hit a baseline 2-point shot that was his bread and butter shot earlier in the season. We haven't seen it much lately, but he can do that, and he can also make plays and hit cutters, which he did. So I think it was a good night from him. His defense is still an issue. I just mentioned it every single time, but I gotta reiterate it if it's still true. And there were issues, especially when the Boston Celtics got the ball into the hands of one of their best offensive perimeter players, and they were able to target Grady Dick. It puts the Toronto Raptors defense into help rotation. But when it comes to help rotation, if you've got 3 good defenders on the floor instead of 2, you're able to make better rotations, and it wasn't as disastrous as it has been in the past. So I think it was a pretty good game for him. Off of the bench, why don't we start with Jamal Shead? I think Jamal Shead is one of the most intriguing players on the Toronto Raptors because of the growth of his 3-point shot. Jamal Shead had 8 points on 3 of 6 shooting. He was 2 of 4 from 3, so his shot continues to look good. 0 rebounds, 1 assist, 0 steals, 0 blocks, 3 turnovers. So not a great night from the playmaking department, but I still noticed a bunch of really nice passes that he's making. I find like his game sense, pass accuracy, the ability to run the point, I think is strong. We've seen, +5 assist games in the past, and even though this wasn't one of them, his shot is continuing to look good. It looks compact. He's getting it off. It's high. The release is nice. I'm just liking what I'm seeing from his shot, and I think that could be, a big area of growth for him, because that was his weakness coming out of college, has been his shooting. And yeah, I think he had a good night. We'll talk Ochai Agbaji because he had to leave the game early. He had 5 points on 2 of 5 shooting. He had a three rebounds and assist, and was playing good defense until kind of a freak injury where he fell down, put his hand out, and it got caught on Peyton Pritchard's shoe, and it kind of cut his hand. So weird injury. He had to leave for the rest of the game and get his hand stitched up. He was bleeding all over the court, so we didn't see him for the rest of the game. So just thought I'd mention that. So next up, we'll go to Chris Boucher. Chris Boucher finally cooled off. He had 5 points on 2 of 7 shooting. He was 1 of 4 from 3, so tried to recreate the magic from the last couple of games, but his shot wasn't on. Thankfully, he contributed on the boards. 1 offensive rebound, but 8 defensive rebounds. Usually he's not a very good defensive rebounder because he kind of jumps at the ball. He doesn't really box out, but he wasn't able to recreate the magic, but he did contribute on the boards. And, I think he did an okay job defensively as well. And then we get to the 2 guys that have been kind of my nemesis this season since they've come back from injury, Bruce Brown and Kelly Olynyk. Bruce Brown, we'll start with him. His second half, I will admit, his second half was a lot better than his first half. So I will give him credit there. He wasn't horrendous the entire night, but in the first half he was horrible, making tons of really bad decisions, both on offense and on defense. His floater, it's just driving me nuts that he keeps taking this shot. And then in the final possession, or one of the final possessions of the first half, he fouled Peyton Pritchard to give him a 4-point play. It just made me go bonkers. But I will admit that he did have a better second half. He finished with 7 points on 3 of 9 shooting, so not very efficient. 7 rebounds, 4 offensive rebounds, so good on him for that. 0 steals, 0 blocks, 0 assists, 0 turnovers, but he pitched in on the boards, which is something that the Raptors bench needs help with. So very bad first half, pretty good second half. Still just really, really need him to play better. Next up, Kelly Olynyk. Kind of similar here. His defense is still pretty lackluster. He's in the right spots most of the time. He's just very limited athletically, especially at this stage in his career. He finished with 7 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists, very nice. 0 steals, 0 blocks, 0 turnovers. He had a couple of very nice assists in this game, helped run the offense. He did some good things, and he tries his best, but a lot of the time it's just not very pretty on the defensive end. I'll give them, in terms of what they've been delivering the past couple of games, Bruce Brown and Kelly Olynyk exceeded expectations, but I would still put them in the negatives. So, and yeah, that was the game. Great game. Really loved seeing that. Obviously very conflicting from a tank standpoint because, they've won 2 games in a row. That's when the alarm bells start to go off. But any time the Raptors can beat the Boston Celtics, I will take it. And they made them look silly. The Celtics have a really horrible style of basketball. They are pretty much, when anybody complains about the NBA, where they're saying every shot is a 3-point shot, they're talking about the Boston Celtics. The Celtics play a style of basketball that I hate. And while I don't mind, Jason Tatum seems like a decent dude, and I hate the way they play, and I don't like their coach. I don't like Joe Mazzulla. He rubs me the wrong way. So when they can beat the Boston Celtics, I love it. And the Celtics took 46 three-point shots, and they only shot 34%. The Raptors took 34, so 12 fewer three-point shots. And I think that the Raptors played good defense. I think that they were, bothering the Celtics shots enough. They did give up a couple of wide open threes that thankfully the Celtics just were not able to make. But in the second half, the Celtics were visibly frustrated. They were frustrated with the Raptors. They were frustrated with the refs. They were frustrated with themselves. And that just goes to show that the Toronto Raptors were playing some good defense. They were really making the Celtics work, and they were getting pissy, and they were moaning and looking really cranky. And that's what I love to see. So good job, Raptors. Next up, the Toronto Raptors play the Bucks in Milwaukee. Milwaukee Bucks have really turned their season around, so they've made me look silly. They're 22-17. They've won 4 of their past 5 games. The Raptors are playing them on the road in Milwaukee, so probably not looking like a win there. The Raptors only have 1 road win this season. So yeah, it's probably not going to be a win there, but if you're a fan of the tank, that should, get them back on track, back on the tank track. In terms of the game, what do you think about beating the Boston Celtics? Are you happy to see the Raptors roll over a division foe? Are you upset that the Raptors have lost ground in the tank standings? Let me know what you think in the comments and also on Twitter and Blue Sky, where you can reach me at Raps Report. I love talking to Raptors fans. You know how I feel about you guys. We're the best. And if you haven't already, leave a like and subscribe. And as always, thanks for tuning in to Raptors Report, your source for in-depth Raptors content.